right, welcome into the First and 30 Football Podcast. I am your host, Dylan Mel, and today we're going to be talking about why the NFC North may be on pace to be the greatest division in NFL history. And no, I'm not speaking hyperbole. The numbers are showing that this might be the best division in NFL that we have ever seen. Now, we're going to touch on that, but I want to start this podcast off, as many of you will know, it is the first podcast on this channel. So I'm going to spend maybe a couple minutes here introducing myself, talking about why I made this podcast channel. If you're just here for the NFC North talk, the timestamps will be in the description. I don't blame you. Skip ahead and we'll talk some football. Now, for the people that are here that have come over from the Dylan Mel NFL channel, thank you for joining me. If you're wondering, Dylan, why is this not just going live on that channel? I got you. The YouTube algorithm has become a very niche-driven algorithm. And yes, I cover NFL, broad NFL on both channels. But they have decided in their algorithm that my Dylan Mel NFL channel needs to be 10 to 20 minute videos max. And that's cool. It's fine. That's what they push. So that's what I'm putting out there. That is what the majority of the audience, even on the Dylan Mel NFL channel, is there for. That's why that's what they push it. But I did want to come up here, big yapper, and do a weekly podcast talking about a couple topics from the NFL and just letting it go. This isn't going to be super heavily edited. You'll see maybe some banners at the bottom, but mostly this is going to be me just talking to you guys about whatever football topic is interesting me that week. There's still going to be the same content you've been getting on the Dylan Mel NFL channel. Now, you're just going to get a weekly, maybe twice a week podcast from me on this channel, just depending on how news heavy the NFL is, how busy it is during playoff season, etc. But once a week, every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that is when you can expect this podcast to go live. Big inspiration for me, Kenny Beecham, King of the Fourth Quarter. You might know him from KOT4Q, Kenny for Real, the Small Ball Podcast. If that's sounding familiar, I'm kind of copying his mold here. I have the Dylan Mel NFL channel, which, resembles his Kenny for Real channel. 10 to 20 minute videos on the NBA is what he does. I do 10 to 20 minutes on the NFL. This is First and 30 Podcast. That symbolizes the Small Ball Podcast. I have Yappin' Football. That's his version of Numbers on the Board. I don't have a channel where I play Madden. Maybe if this ever becomes a real thing, I'll put some time into that. But 3 channels is a decent amount for a guy who only has one channel monetized. I understand. I just think it is a cleaner way to at least even organize my videos. If you want the long podcasts and you're fine listening to me yap and just go off like this, you're here. If not, you're over on the Dylan Mel NFL channel. And if you're here and not there, go check out that channel. It's more NFL and it's easier to digest. I feel like everybody that's here would want to be there as well, but not everybody there would want to be here. But what do I know? But yeah, for anybody that was wondering, that is essentially what led to me creating this channel. I had tried to post a couple of these first and 30s on the Dylan Mel NFL channel. They did really bad algorithm wise. And because my channel over there isn't that big, they stunted the growth of other videos because YouTube thought I was kind of trying to switch my niche and then they couldn't figure out where to place me. It's cool. It is what it is. But that is really the back end of why this channel is being created. It is pretty much an SEO based thing, which, hey, no problem for me there. I got no problem making a new email and putting together a new channel to just talk some football with y'all. I hope you guys enjoy the podcasts. Any feedback, obviously, we are in the beginning stages of this project. So if you were here from episode 1 and this blows up, you get to say you were here from episode 1. Big congrats there, but enough yapping about, back end algorithm stuff. We've been going on about that for a couple minutes now. Let's talk some football. So as I mentioned in the intro, this video is going to be focusing on the NFC North and why they may be the best division in the NFL of all time. They're off to the hottest start a division has ever had that I can remember. Now, the one division that they'll be competing with is the 2013 NFC West, and we'll talk about them in just a second. But I don't remember that division starting off this hot. I don't know if it's because I was, 13, 14, really just getting into football and certainly not as into it as I am now, or if it's because, they just didn't. But this NFC North is the first division since the realignment in 2002 that through 6 weeks, all 4 teams have 4+ wins. The Vikings, 5-0. The Detroit Lions, 4-1. The Chicago Bears are 4-2. And the Green Bay Packers are also 4-2. The division through 6 weeks is a plus 211 in point differential. They're not just winning, they're dominating. They have the top 4 teams in the NFL in point differential. The NFC North is flat out beating up other teams and winning a lot of freaking football games. And like I said, they have the top 4 teams in point differential. It's not just, oh, well, the 5-0 Vikings really carrying the weight there, or oh, the Lions really carrying the weight there after their beatdown of the Cowboys. It's none of that. It is a division full of mammoths. This is really, really good football being played in the NFC North, and they are scary. And the fact that one of these teams might miss the playoffs just because they all have to play each other and beat up on each other kind of sucks. Because, I think general consensus would be that the Bears will be the odd team out, rookie quarterback. Not everybody sold on Eberflus. But if they miss out, and it's because they were 9-8, because they went through a dogfight of this division, and then we see, a team like the Falcons get in at 10-7, or, the Seahawks kind of bounce back and they sneak in, but we all kind of knew that the Bears were playing better football at the end of the year. That's something that could happen and could really stink. Now, I mentioned that this could be the best division in NFL history, and I do believe that. It certainly could be. What is the previous best division in NFL history, though, is something we have to think about when we're staking a claim like that. For me, I landed on the 2013 NFC West. There was a 2000s AFC South that matched this record in win percentage, but I'll get into why I have this as the best division ever. So the record for that division was a combined 42-22, a .656 win percentage. So they won 2/3 of their games that year as a division. They had the 13-3 eventual Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks with a Legion of Boom, Marshawn Lynch, Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin. They were really good. This was a stacked team. They had the 12-4 49ers with Colin Kaepernick, Frank Gore, Jim Harbaugh was the coach. You had Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, just a really, really strong 49ers team. Kaepernick, when I was growing up, was what Lamar Jackson is today in terms of this guy's a freak with his speed and mobility. Obviously, Lamar is a mile or 5 ahead of where Kaepernick was as a quarterback, but that my point being, that's how we looked at the 49ers, the way we look at the Ravens today. They were that good. The 10-6 Arizona Cardinals with Carson Palmer, Larry Fitzgerald, I believe David Johnson, this was like his really big year. I think they might have had Michael Floyd too, if I'm not mistaken. Throwback name. That's one of them names that when you're naming dudes, I think you could throw Michael Floyd out there. And the 7-9 Rams, of course, they were 7-9. They were coached by Jeff Fisher. If you know, you know. Jeff Fisher finishes 7-9. And they had a plus 359 point differential on the season. Now, obviously, when you look to compare right now, you can't fully just stat it out, because if you statted it out, the Vikings are going to be a 17-0 team, right? I don't know if that's something that we could look to happen, but the plus 359 point differential for the entire season for the West, and then the NFC North, it's plus 211. That's something that feels like the NFC North can pass the 2013 NFC West. They play each other, so obviously when the Packers play the Vikings, the point differential in the division stays the same. Because as one team goes up, the other one goes down the exact amount, obviously. So I don't know, because there's obviously a lot of divisional games to be played, but, if we continue to see the Lions and Vikings dominate some teams like they have, the Packers, the way that they played the Cardinals, the Bears, the way that they play the Jaguars, if we keep seeing those as they're out of division games, it's certainly possible. And I want to pose a question to you guys here. For this to be the best division in NFL history, do you believe that the NFC North has to have a Super Bowl champion or even a Super Bowl representative? Because the 2013 NFC West had the best record of all time, a great point differential, but they also had the Super Bowl champion Seahawks, and the Seahawks actually played the 49ers in the NFC Championship to get there. Some food for thought there. If the 49ers get back to the Super Bowl and they beat the Lions in the NFC Championship, but the NFC North's record overall, they won 68% of their games. Are they the best division of all time because they technically were in the regular season, or do you need to see postseason success from the NFC North as a whole? I haven't really quite decided where I'm at. I think there needs to be some fashion, but I think as long as one of the NFC North teams makes the Super Bowl, I don't think that they'd have to win, especially if they're playing the Chiefs. But those are just my thoughts on it. That's like my food for thought there. But that is what the NFC North is up against in terms of how good do they need to be the best division of all time. Can they do it? Let's talk about it team by team. Of course, we're going to start off with the Minnesota Vikings, who probably, I would say, are the biggest surprise in the NFL this season. They're one of two teams to start off the year 5-0, them and the Kansas City Chiefs, the back-to-back Super Bowl champions with Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Travis Kelce. Yeah, those Chiefs and these Minnesota Vikings, who some people predicted to have a top 5 pick in the draft. It wasn't me, but I did have them finishing last in this division. I can certainly own that. And they might actually be the most complete team in the NFL. At least through 6 weeks, they have certainly performed like that. Let's talk about the Vikings as a whole, then the offense, then the defense. As a whole, they have the best plus minus in the NFL. They are plus 63 against their opponents. And I know what you're thinking, Dylan, it's 6 weeks, maybe the schedule is more favorable. Maybe it was. But they do have wins over the 49ers, the Packers, with Jordan Love playing, and the Texans. Teams that many view as legit Super Bowl contenders. All 3 of them have been in my Super Bowl contenders tier list in my videos. And many of which look at those as good teams, I would say. With good quarterbacks, Purdy, Jordan Love, CJ Stroud. Those are impressive wins. And, the 49ers and Texans, I would say they dominated. The score might not reflect it for San Francisco, but it was a pretty handled beatdown. And they had a really early lead all over the Packers. The Packers stormed back in that game, which, speaks to their grit and their, gusto to be able to fight in those games. But the Vikings were up pretty early in that game, and it didn't look like it was going to be competitive in the first half. So the Vikings do have the ability to even dominate teams like the Green Bay Packers for stints. This is a very good team. The Vikings offense, it's incredibly efficient, averaging 28 points per game, which is top 10 in the NFL, but they're not top 10 in the NFL in terms of passing yards or rushing yards. And it's a double-edged sword here, because it's like, hey, this team is scoring a lot of points. They're very efficient. That's great. But without the yardage numbers to back it up, can they keep that up? Or is it a little fluky how many points the Vikings are scoring? They're top 5 in converting in the red zone trip. Right now, it's 69%. Nice. But can they sustain that level of conversion in the red zone? Can they continue to take the ball away from opposing teams, which we will talk about, and get into good field position, which is why maybe the yardage thing isn't as strong as it needs to be, or as strong as you would like it to be to reflect these stats. Is that the case? The Vikings do start in good field position. The Vikings do convert when they get down the field. Are both of those sustainable for the full season? I mean, that's really the question when it comes to this offense. Not a lot of people expected them to be, one of the better scoring teams in the NFL and one of the better red zone offenses in the NFL. But head coach Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold have been masterful this year. Sam Darnold is in MVP conversations, but I think if the season ended today, it would go to Lamar Jackson. Because, obviously Lamar over Sam Darnold isn't a hot take here, but Lamar is more valuable at this point. Darnold, to me, has been the perfect game manager for this Vikings team. And I've been saying it for about 3 weeks now. The Minnesota Vikings, to me, are the closest assembly that I could give in recent history is the 2019 49ers. Sam Darnold does his job, and Sam Darnold's better than Jimmy Garoppolo, so don't hear what I'm not saying there. But in terms of team construct, it's an all-around team effort. They have the offensive mastermind. They have the quarterback that is getting the job done. They have great weapons around him, a decent offensive line, a defense that steps up. It's not one for one, but in my opinion, that's the best comparison we're getting here, right? They all perform at a high level. It starts obviously on the offensive end with Kevin O'Connell, who, underrated, overrated. You could have that conversation, but I think is knocking on the door of top 5 head coaches in the NFL. You got Reed, Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur in the division. And then maybe start to have that Kevin O'Connell conversation. Do you talk about the Harbaugh brothers? I'm sure there's a couple guys that I just missed there because it wasn't a coaching video, but my point being, starts with those guys. But then you look at the weapons on this team and you're like, oh, well, yeah, as long as Sam Darnold just does his job, they're going to be successful. Justin Jefferson, who coming into the year, I had Tyreek Hill as a better wide receiver than him. Hand up, I'll say it. I changed my opinion. And I think that's an important thing, side tangent here, but it is a podcast for sports fans to be able to do. Change your opinion on a player. And I don't know why that is considered to be controversial, but I'm going to change my opinion when I see new information and when I see guys play. And Justin Jefferson not skipping a beat from Kirk Cousins to Sam Darnold. Justin Jefferson's elite route running, his consistency as always winning, him being a big threat in the red zone, the size, the speed, the strength. Yeah, to me, he is the best wide receiver in football. Jordan Addison, a very great number 2, one of the best number 2s in the NFL. You talk about wide receiver duos. You talk about Chase and Higgins, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I think we're at the point where Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison should be in those conversations. Aaron Jones has been a great pickup for them. He is certainly better than Dalvin Cook was, and certainly better than the Ty Chandler, Alexander Madison combination this team was rolling out last year. And this is all without TJ Hawkinson back in the lineup yet. Hawkinson's a top 5 tight end in the NFL and a hell of a vertical threat. The Vikings have weapons. And Sam Darnold is showing with their weapons, he could perform. 1,111 yards to open up the season. That averages out to 222 a game. 11 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. So it's not great. It's borderline 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, which is where you want to be, but we'll see how it tracks out the rest of the season. And a 103.4 passer rating. Sam Darnold has been legit, and the Vikings offense can move the football. And for anybody that says it's a fluke, Sam Darnold's not that good, yada yada. Again, I think Darnold is better than Jimmy Garoppolo, but I want you to look at the 2019 49ers. You can replicate high-level offensive success with an elite play caller and head coach, elite weapons, and a good offensive line, and a quarterback that knows how to do his job, all paired with a good run game. Darnold doesn't have to be Mahomes or Allen or Burrow to have a great season and to lead this team to a 1 seed in the NFC. I think the offense has the makings to sustain this level of success. And the defense, some would argue that this is the real story of this Vikings team. And Brian Flores has cooked up a masterclass when it comes to an NFL defense. They might be the best defense through 6 weeks. They're competing with their in-division rivals. I think the Bears and the Packers are both up there as well. But I would give the edge to Minnesota. And they've only played 5 games, so I know I'm saying through 6 weeks, but it's just easier because that's where we are in the NFL season. They're allowing just 15.2 points per game. They're second in the NFL in sacks, and they allow less than 70 rushing yards per game. And even with a bye week, this defense leads the NFL in interceptions at 11. And again, they've played Jordan Love. They've played CJ Stroud. They've played Brock Purdy. They've played quarterbacks who are good, and in Stroud and Purdy, who traditionally take care of the football. Jordan Love's got a little bit of Brett Favre in him, so he's susceptible to throw an interception. But I think they picked him off 4 times in that game. Point being, this defense gets after the quarterback. This defense takes the ball away from you, and this defense doesn't really let you score. Even if you are an elite offense, they show out. They are a very, very good unit of guys. And it speaks to, one, the personnel, obviously. You brought in a guy like Gilmore, you brought in a Jonathan Gennard, you drafted a Dallas Turner, you still have Harrison Smith on this unit. It's a really good group of guys that I don't think has a star player. There's no Micah Parsons, TJ Watt on this defense. It's just a lot of guys that are good at doing their job. And I respect that. The defense has confused, intimidated, and really just dominated opposing quarterbacks to open up the season. And it's because Flores runs a ton of different looks, a ton of disguise coverages. You don't know who's coming. You don't know who's dropping into coverage. You don't know if it's a blitz or if it's not. None of the looks look the same. So when it comes to pre-snap diagnosis, opposing quarterbacks almost can't. Obviously, as the season goes on and more film comes out on these guys, we'll see the battle of adjustments. But through 6 weeks, they're the only defense in the NFL like this. Brian Flores has created a one-of-one defensive unit that when opposing quarterbacks see it, they don't know what to do against it. I'll be interested to see, especially in division, Caleb gets a second look. Goff gets a second look. Love gets a second look. What kind of adjustments do we see? And how does the chess battle go? Because Flores is going to adjust too. But, Brock Purdy, post-game. And, you could say Brock Purdy's not great, whatever you feel about him, but he is one of the better pre-snap diagnosis guys in the NFL. He's smart, high IQ guy. That's why he works so well in a Shanahan offense. He said he'd never seen anything like it. He said this defense, it is one of one. And I believe him, because that's what the tape shows too. So the Vikings, with a offense full of elite players that are, yes, efficient, but are efficient because of their elite players and elite play caller, and a defense that is one of one, and a 5-0 start to the year, they're going to be a good team. They're going to be a playoff team, and they might have home field advantage throughout the whole playoffs. Next, let's talk about the 4-1 Detroit Lions, who, as many of you know, was my pick to go to the Super Bowl this year. I certainly pride myself on being unbiased when it comes to NFL talk. I know you guys see the Eagles flags and stuff, and yes, I am an Eagles fan, and I root for them, but the Lions are a different breed of an NFL team. And I kind of saw that coming into the season. Progression in the NFL isn't always linear, but you could pretty much track it with the Lions. 2 years ago, they finished the year beating Green Bay, and it was a team that everybody looked at and was like, next year, they're going to be a real team. The following year, last year, they get all the way to the NFC Championship. They have a lead in that game versus San Francisco. I thought that they were going to, win that game by halftime for sure. I think a lot of Lions fans and just a lot of NFL fans as a whole agreed there. And then coming into this year, it's like, They continued again to make the right improvements on the defensive line, added some cornerback depth, and it's like, yeah, this is a team that I think can represent the NFC without a doubt this year. I thought that they were actually going to win the NFC North pretty handily. This is the team that I thought was going to be the team in this division. So it's pretty easy for me to talk about this team. And I think, they've matched expectations this year, right? Detroit is advertised as a team with grit that beats you up on both sides of the ball. And that's exactly what they've done. But more so on the offensive side of the ball. This is an offensive driven team. They might have the best offense in the NFL. On offense, the Lions have, in my opinion, and I think it's a pretty close to a fact here, the best running back room in all of football, with the tandem of David Montgomery, who just earned himself a nice little payday extension, and Jahmyr Gibbs, who I say complement each other like peanut butter and jelly. Obviously, Montgomery is peanut butter, and obviously Gibbs is jelly. Fight me in the comment section about that one, because that's just the fact there. The Lions offense behind these two is currently 5th in the NFL in rushing yards per game at 151. But by the season's end, I think that this is a top 3 running back room and just rushing offense. The Lions had a weird game or two where I thought that they, for some reason, tried to switch up their identity. And I don't know if that was just Ben Johnson getting a little cute with the play calling, or they just wanted to get Jameson Williams going as early as they could in the season. But something about them early on in this season I didn't like. I thought the offense was, I called it, Jameson Williams centric. And I thought they got away from their running mentality. That game versus the Rams to open the year, I thought that they got away from that for most of the game. Overtime hits, you go back to your roots, and David Montgomery essentially by himself just plows down the field and wins that game versus LA. Then there was the game versus Tampa. I thought they threw the ball a little bit too much in that game. But over the last month, the Lions have gotten back to playing Lions football. And when they play Lions football, I think it's hard to say that they're not a top 3 offense in the NFL for sure. They have that great offensive line. They have Sewell. They have Ragnow on there and out at the center. And, Montgomery and Gibbs behind that offensive line, best of luck if your defensive line isn't fully healthy. We saw what happened to the Cowboys yesterday, or as I'm recording it yesterday for you guys, Sunday. They got beat up by Detroit. And then when you establish the run like that, that opens up the passing game for Jared Goff to weapons like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, who had kind of been MIA for a little bit, put that 50-plus yard touchdown, have a nice little catch there. Laporta, Jameson Williams, he's kind of started to develop into his own here. And, you look at this Detroit offense and you talk about sustained success. Can offenses sustain their success throughout a season? Detroit, while yes, they do play a lot of their games in a dome this year, and I think it's like 14 of 17, and that favors Goff tremendously. You talk about playoff football. Montgomery and Gibbs are going to beat teams up in the playoffs. That offensive line is going to beat teams up. Detroit can control the football. They have a sustainable offense. They have a long-term success offense. And overall, the Lions offense right now is 4th in the NFL in yards per game, just under 400. And again, with the weapons that they have and Ben Johnson calling plays, I don't see why this team can't sustain that level of success. In fact, other teams might fall off a little bit. Right now, if I had to pick between Detroit's offense or the Commanders, give me Detroit. And the Commanders might be ahead of them in terms of yards per game right now. If I had to pick between, in this division, the Packers offense or the Lions, I would pick the Lions in terms of long-term success. The only team that I think really it's a question is the Baltimore Ravens. And that's because they have Lamar Jackson, who's a one-of-one freak. But yeah, Jared Goff plus protection plus these weapons, that is going to equal success for Detroit. It did last year, and it's going to this year. The offense, you can kind of just copy and paste what we saw last year with a little bit less Sam Laporta and a little bit more Jameson Williams. Weapons like Tim Patrick and Khalif Raymond, they can make big plays too. They're really solid 3rd and 4th options. Detroit's got a good team. There's no doubt about that in my mind. The defense. The defense did just take a big blow, losing Aiden Hutchinson for the season. That is certainly something that concerns me. I think their front office should call up the Jets about Hassan Reddick. You should call the Raiders about Max Crosby. You should try and get an edge rusher that that you could plug into this lineup. There's no doubt about that in my mind. This team should be pursuing an edge rusher. I will just start off saying that. But even before that, the defense was pretty middle of the pack, But with how much their offense controls the ball, I think middle of the pack is serviceable for the Lions. They have some good personnel, Brian Branch, DJ Reader, Davenport, Anzalone, Carlton Davis, Terry and Arnold. There's pieces on this defense that make plays. They're not going to be the top of the top, and that may be what holds them back, because there may be a playoff game versus Minnesota, versus Green Bay, versus San Francisco, versus my Eagles maybe, where things get into a shootout. And, their defense can't get the stop that they need. They can't get the big stop. That could be the Achilles heel of the Detroit Lions. But for a regular season team, and again, for a concept of, can this division be the winningest, best division ever? I like what the Lions bring to the table for 17 regular season games. And I even like what they bring to the table for a playoff run. Again, this is a team that I predicted to get to the Super Bowl. Not having a star edge rusher anymore in Aiden Hutchinson really freaking blows for that. But, trade deadline hasn't passed. There's some disgruntled edge rushers. I think the Lions can make a move. And, if you get Max Crosby, you kind of improved from where you were at the start of the season. Lions fans, let me know if I'm hot taking here, but Crosby is better than Hutchinson. If you get Reddick, then you downgrade a little bit. But point B, their defense can get to middle of the pack and fall behind that top two, potentially not two offense in the NFL. Next, let's talk about the 4-2 Chicago Bears. And after all the talk about Caleb Williams not being good, being overrated, being a bust of a first pick that I had to hear after telling you how good he was going to be after the first 2 weeks of the year. Yeah, you know what? It turns out the guy who was the number 1 overall prospect for 2 years in the NFL might actually be kind of good. There might be a reason why he was looked at as that good. And listen, you could hear me just tell you it was good. You could go watch the film or give you the numbers. Through the last 4 weeks, 1,050 yards, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. A 3-1 record overall. Caleb, obviously, the 3-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, that's where you want to be. He really showed off against Jacksonville, his mobility, what he could do with his legs. He was picking up first downs, making really big plays. I think it is beyond safe to say that Caleb Williams is starting to figure it out for the Chicago Bears. And that is great. It's great that he's hitting this early because he is hitting his stride. We talked about the Bears season. The second half of their schedule on paper was certainly harder than the first half of their schedule. So this is the spot to rack up some wins here. If you are Caleb and the Bears, they beat the Jaguars. Now they're on a bye week. If I remember correctly, they don't have too difficult of a game after that bye week. It might be the Patriots I don't know. But my point being, the Bears are in a pretty good spot to open up this season and rattle off a good record to kind of balance out the second half of the year where they do play a lot of these teams in this NFC North. And obviously, again, if you had to pick a team that was going to finish 4th in this division, right now you'd probably pick the Chicago Bears. But if you had to pick a team that was going to finish 4th in this division to open up the year, you probably would have picked the Minnesota Vikings. So, I don't want to write off the Bears so quickly. The Bears offense, let's start there. Through the first couple weeks, they looked sloppy. They looked like they weren't figuring it out. And it turns out that the players felt the same way. And at the time when this happened, I'm going to be honest, I didn't think it was going to result or yield something good. The Bears went to Shane Waldron, the players, and said something's got to change. This play calling, it's not working. It's kind of garbanzo. We want to do something different. And usually a couple weeks into the season, a month into the season, the players going to the offensive coordinator being like, hey, you need to do your job better. It's not something that I expect to be like, oh, that's going to work out great for them. But it kind of did. And the offense has looked a lot better. DeAndre Swift, He has been getting better looks, better touches. He's looked explosive. He's been a real player for this team. He's looking like the guy that, when free agency first opened, the Chicago Bears were the first team to sign a player, and that player was DeAndre Swift. They wanted him, he wanted them, and they made it work. And each of the receiving weapons in DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, and Cole Kmet have had their days, had their plays. Keenan Allen, 2 touchdowns in London. Cole Kmet, 2 touchdowns in London. Dude was even playing long snapper. I mean, that is just football being a football. That is awesome. John Madden would have loved that. That's a football guy right there. That was great. And it's still statistically just a middle of the pack offense, but there's a lot of room to grow here. Caleb's getting better. We all acknowledge that the weapons room is one of the better ones in the NFL. Rome Odunze is going to get better. The offensive line has been playing decent. The run game is there. Swift has been playing better. Roshan Johnson's been getting involved. So the Bears offense, is it going to be top 10 at some point this season? I doubt it. Maybe. I mean, if Caleb really starts to fast track his progression, but I doubt it. But are they going to be good enough to win games with how good the defense is? I do think so. And speaking of the defense, it looks like for a few weeks, as the offense was struggling, that the defense was going to have to win them games. Week 1 versus the Titans was a prime example of that. I think it was like defense and special teams that scored all the touchdowns for the Bears in that game, if I'm remembering it correctly. And the Titans are the Titans, and they have Will Levis at quarterback, so the Bears were able to go out there and win that football game, which, man, looking back at week 1, talk about sloppy, disgusting play. Go watch that Bears-Titans game if you want to see that. But, they relied on this defense to be the strength of the team, and they were that. This is a top 10 defense in the NFL in yards allowed per game, and it is top 6 against the pass. In the modern day NFL, if you had to pick between stopping the run or stopping the pass, you pick to stop the pass because it is a passing league now. You want to force teams to run the football. Now, obviously, in this division, playing a team like Detroit, I think Detroit matches up pretty well against Chicago because, Chicago is not as strong against the run. Detroit is super strong against the run. But when you play a team like the Packers, who like to throw the football, yes, they have Jacobs, and we'll get there, this can, work out in your favor. And this Bears defense, it takes the ball away, right? They are tied with the Vikings for the second most turnovers forced in the NFL at 13. And the only team ahead of those two teams, by the way, is the Green Bay Packers at 17. So these teams in this division take the ball away from you. The Bears are also top 6 in the NFL in sacks at 18 total. The Bears defense is kind of underrated, but it's one of the best in the NFL. Again, get to the quarterback, take the ball away, stop your air attack. Some of that, of course, is quarterbacks they've played. They played Will Levis, they've played Trevor Lawrence. So I'm not stupid to the fact that, some of the schedule has been there. This team has also played against a CJ Stroud, another good quarterback. So it's not like they played against all dog water. It's not like they played against all great. But my point being, the Bears defense is performing. And they have some really good players, Montez Sweat, Jalen Johnson, Jaquan Brisker, TJ Edwards. They have great players on this roster. They're going to perform at a high level. And while the Bears, may not strike fear into their opponents at a high level, I want to give you a couple of stats here to close out this Bears conversation as to why the Bears might be able to sustain success as a team for the full year that maybe, if you're 50-50 on the Bears, can swing you to this being a good team. They have the great turnover differential. We talked about that. Ways to win football games. Don't give the ball to the other team. Take it from them. It's pretty simple. It's pretty basic. But when you track at the end of years, teams that have the better turnover differential usually win a lot of football games. They have the 4th best point differential at plus 41 right now. So it's not just that they're winning, but they are beating down on their competition when they do win. Granted, all 4 of their wins have come against 1-win teams. So I hear you there. But they're doing their job against those 1-win teams. They are dominating. They are winning these games pretty heavily. And you talked about, they've played easy teams. They are playing a 4th place schedule. They're going to keep playing easy teams. They have the 5th easiest strength of schedule remaining. So all of that compiled, Caleb's getting better. You have the weapons. You have a good defense. You take the ball away. You don't give it up. you're going to be playing bad teams. In terms of what the core of this video is, can the NFC North be the best division of all time? Remember, that 2013 NFC West, the weak link was the Rams at 7-9. This Bears team, while would be perceived as the weak link, feels like an over 500 football team. The Bears are a playoff caliber team. We'll see if they get in because of the division. No teams ever had 4 get in. Obviously, with the new playoff format, it's now possible. But, I don't think we should be sleeping on the Chicago Bears. And then, of course, we get to the last team in this NFC North division, the Green Bay Packers, who are 4-2 as well. This is, again, a loaded division here. The Green Bay Packers, who, despite missing their quarterback for a third of the season, have the 3rd best point differential in the NFL and are 4-2. Yes, this Green Bay Packers roster. If you had any doubts as to how deep the team was, again, with Malik Willis this year, they are 2-0. He is one of 3 undefeated quarterbacks, technically. Willis, Darnold, and Patrick Mahomes. No, it wasn't on my bingo card, and it certainly wasn't on yours either. And the real joy of this Packers team for me, and what separates them from the Vikings, the Lions, and the Bears in their division, is how much do you weigh the head coach quarterback combo? Because the Packers have a top 5 head coach quarterback combo in the NFL. In Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur. You think of the great, obviously, Mahomes, Reed, McVay, Stafford, Harbaugh, Lamar. You could go Harbaugh, Herbert. You could, I think those are the 5. Do you do D'Amico, Stroud? Maybe that's 6. But, other than that, quickly just breezing through these teams here, nothing else is jumping off the page to me. I mean, do you believe in McDermott, Allen? Do you believe in Taylor, Burrow? It feels like a little bit of a tier below in terms of coaching, but my point being, what do successful teams have in the NFL? I've famously said this on my channel multiple times, 70 to 75% of the battle is quarterback, head coach. Usually when you have those things, the rest of the roster somehow falls in place. And I realized I didn't even change the color for the last couple. We'll change it to package green. But my point being, when you have the head coach and you have the quarterback, things tend to fall into place. And they have for the Packers. And again, the Packers are one of the NFL's best and most winningest organizations because they, prioritize offensive line, have good quarterback play, and have a good defense. The weapons, there's a billion of them in the NFL. They spend at the right spot. It's a well-run organization. The Packers offense. The Packers on a yards per game basis have the 3rd best offense and the 2nd best rushing attack. And again, remember, these stats are with Jordan Love missing 2 games. Now, the rushing attack will probably go down a little bit. The passing attack will probably go up. That makes sense. But it's still been the 3rd best offense in the NFL. They are averaging 400 yards per game. And a third of those games are with a backup quarterback. What does that tell you about Matt LaFleur? What does that tell you about Josh Jacobs? What does that tell you about Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and these weapons? It's a good freaking team. And the Jacobs addition has been great. He's currently 4th in the NFL in rushing yards. I would like to see him get in the end zone more, but he's been consistently pretty good. That game versus the Colts, I mean, you talk about going out there and getting a win through your running back. What was that, 151 rushing yards for Jonathan Taylor? Or, Josh Jacobs? Thinking Colts, but my point being, they absolutely performed. They dominated at a high level in that game. And the weapons on the offense, I've talked about it on my channel. They may lack an alpha, a true wide receiver 1, but Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Tucker Kraft, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, we saw it all on display versus the Cardinals. Jaden Reed scored, Christian Watson scored, Romeo Doubs scored twice. The week before against the Rams, Tucker Kraft had the long touchdown. We've seen Dontavian Wicks have some big plays. He got hurt in that game versus Arizona, but they have a slew, and I mean a slew, of weapons in Green Bay. And with Jordan Love distributing, Matt LaFleur calling plays, yeah, they are one of the more dangerous offenses in the NFL. They're very unpredictable. That's what makes them so dangerous. And my one concern for the offense has always been, in a tight playoff game, who do you go to? Does Jordan Love have a guy he trusts at the end of the year? It feels like Jaden Reed might be that guy, but they have time to figure it out. And they could always go get a Devontae Adams back on this squad and, go all in. It's possible. The defense. What makes the Packers defense so great to open the season is how high of a clip they take the frickin' ball away from you. I mentioned that the Bears and the Vikings are tied for second in the NFL for most turnovers. The Packers are in first with 17 forced turnovers. Xavier McKinney, 5 interceptions this season through 6 games. Guy, you don't want to talk about breaking records, and at the safety position, it'd be really tough for him to break the interception record. But my point being, guy's a freaking ball hawk, and they paid him. They paid him and Jacobs this offseason. Those are the big money moves that the Packers made. And it looks like, again, they are spending the money wisely. And I talked about turnover differential with the Bears. The Packers have the best at +9. And that's with Jordan Love having a little bit of that Brett Favre in him. He likes to throw off that back foot a lot. He's, I would like that to be calmed down if I was a Packers fan. He makes big plays, but, this touchdown pass to Romeo Doubs, the second one versus Arizona, if that corner turns around, could be going the other way. So, something there, but the defense, it's strong. And the Packers as well, pretty solid pass rush. Guys like Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Quay Walker, and more. On the back end, you have Jair Alexander and Jarian Cooper. I didn't even mention Kenny Clark. We know that this defense, while statistically it's not amazing in terms of yards given up this season, they take the ball away, but you can move the ball on them. We know in the big games they could step up with this personnel. It's a pretty similar look to what the defense was last year, except with McKinney added and a couple of pieces shuffled around. But, versus Dallas last year, who was one of the better offenses in the NFL, in that wildcard game, the defense went into Dallas and beat them up. And they forced Dak to throw a lot of interceptions. They took the ball away. And again, in playoff games, in big games, it sounds like simple math, but take the ball away from the other team. Don't give it back to them. You get more possessions. You usually win the game. The Packers have a pretty good system in place to do that. And with Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur, they're usually pretty successful when they get extra possessions. The Packers at 4-2 are, again, a really good team. A lot of people picked them to go to the Super Bowl. Peter Schrager, my buddy Zach. So, just name a few. But they're a good football team. So in turn, the NFC North, through 6 weeks, has the top 4 teams in point differential. They have set the record for the most 4-win teams through 6 weeks. They have a ton of talent, and they could become the first division ever to have 4 playoff teams with the new format. Will they be better than the 2013 NFC West? I don't know. What's your criteria for them to be better than the 2013 NFC West? Somebody have to win the Super Bowl? Is it just a regular season thing for you, somewhere in the middle? Let me know in the comment section. Thank you for listening to the first episode of the First and 30 podcast. Again, we'll be back up here every single Tuesday at 3 p.m. There may be a couple of surprise drop podcasts, maybe emergency episodes, but this is the routine. Every Tuesday, 3 p.m., we are talking football long, having good conversations here. I appreciate you. If you made it this far in the video, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It'll be good for the algorithm early on. I appreciate y'all. Catch you later. Peace.